done, we look at it.
No, yeah, through the whole house.
Spreading the joy for Christmas.
Good, James.
Exactly.
Not too bad, yourself? Wonderful.
So Rich, everything, you don't have to end up in Rochester every week, or you still do, or what?
Actually, yeah, I had blood draws every Monday for the first 2 weeks after I came down. And now it's every other week until I was thinking about March. But I can get that done right in Plainview.
Oh, okay.
Now I haven't been back to Rochester for almost probably right now 2 months. I gotta go back in April when they biopsy the kidney to see if it's doing what it's supposed to be
You got
doing.
yours, right? Okay.
Cool.
And other than that, I'm what they call immune suppressed right now because they knock your body's immunity down to nothing. So that it accepts this
So,
kidney.
yeah, I'll do that.
So that's what this pretty little thing is all about.
Oh, just to let everybody know. Secure.
So you carry a bottle of hand sanitizer with you all over the place.
Sarah, would you like some bread?
I'm good, thank you though.
And Sarah has kids coming at 9:30, so she's on a tighter timeline, so.
So we gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of here tonight.
So she asked if she could get moved up in the schedule.
That's okay, because I gotta be out of here.
Is that your turn?
No, it's my
That's
turn.
fine.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, that's his pen back.
That'll look so good. We're ready. We're gonna get out of here tonight too. Curfew in Mona County.
Yeah.
You're good, everyone, away.
Huh? Did all the work.
There's 6 of us.
Cool.
There's 6 of us.
You want to start missing something?
No, there's 6 of us.
Ready? Ready. Okay, we'll call the February 20th Joint Powers, Whitewater Joint Powers meeting to order. Public comments? Nope, nobody. We'll do this quick. Approve the minutes of December 13th meeting. Any questions? Motion by Steve,
Second.
second by Josh, all in favor say aye. Aye. Carries. Approve agenda. Sheila, anything else?
Just the change to move Sarah up in the schedule, and I just wondering if I could add one J to discuss the 319 Focus Watershed Program.
Okay. Anything for the board members? If
I'll
not,
have to approve the amended agenda, and we'll put, I guess put Sarah right after the agenda.
yep. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Right.
Okay, Sarah, we're gonna get you in.
I'll get to go, yay, how
Right.
much time can I have?
Well, obviously about an hour. I think about an hour next to the.
It's usually an hour program, but I can skim it down to a half hour, so.
Okay.
We'll keep it simple. So, yeah, I'm Sarah Holger. I think I've probably met everybody before. You might remember me as Sarah Grover. My name is changed. I'm the same Sarah. I've been here since 2006.
Yes.
And as you guys know, last year was the 100th anniversary of Whitewater State Park. Actually, did your board donate some money?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Because we had, last year, 450,000 people visited Whitewater State Park. It was a record year.
How many?
450,000. I mean, that's mind-blowing. And a lot of that was because we did some special events, right? Once a month last year, there was a centennial event, and some of them, like the Okie Dokie Brothers concert, we had 2,000 people come to. So thank you for your support of those activities. In preparing for that 100th anniversary in 2017, we kicked off an oral history project where we interviewed over 100 different people, local residents, people that have worked at the park, people that have camped and vacationed here, people that currently work here. So we have over 100 oral histories, amazing trove of stories in those oral histories that we recorded. We just wrapped up transcribing all those stories, so every interview we did, we have to type up the interview, which is a lot of work. And then the Minnesota Historical Society has something called Minnesota Reflections. It's a online digital archive, and so these stories are actually all going to be archived there, so anybody can go in, you can search by keyword like CCC at Whitewater, or floods at Whitewater, or pioneers in the Whitewater Valley, and stories will come up based on your keywords that you put in. So what we did here is took just some of those stories, just a handful of them, to put together this presentation just to kind of lay out the history of the Whitewater Valley. And there may be some things that you will be surprised that you didn't know in this presentation. So it is kind of interactive. Usually I would break you up into teams and you'd be competing against each other, but we're going to save some time today. So as we go, there's some questions for you guys and just kind of see if you know the answers to these things. So we are going to listen to some stories that are woven into this as well. Like I have the audio set up so we can hear them. So first of all, we have to go back, way back. Steve, I think you might be the only one. Did any of you attend the theater in the park we did in August?
Yeah.
That was an interesting project to be a part of, and actually we just got that open caption, so that's going to be on YouTube, so anybody can watch that. And I'll send you the link to that because that might be something you want to maybe possibly link to your webpage too. But the story goes way back. We have to think about the geology of this area, which is really unique. So this area is called the Driftless area. Why is that? The last glacier missed this region, right? So really unique things going on here. We talk about the geology with our sinkholes and our caves and our disappearing streams and our springs and our cold water trout streams and just all kinds of amazing stuff. But we have this really unique topography. I grew up west of Lake Minnetonka. It's fairly flat up there, and lakes are everywhere. So I moved down here in 1995, and I was just blown away. Like I didn't learn about this landscape in school. I feel like everybody in Minnesota should learn about why the different parts of Minnesota are different. But really unique topography, and that's going to set the stage for what's going to happen to this valley once more and more people start coming in and change the way we live on the land. Okay, so in 1851 there was a treaty. There's a lot of treaties in the 1850s that were being signed, but one in particular in 1851 opens up land west of the Mississippi River in our area here. So this is when we start to see a big influx of settlers moving into this Whitewater area. Anybody know what treaty that was? This is going way back to like 5th grade in social studies.
Louisiana.
No, a lot of people think of that one though. That one kind of pops up right away. It's a Treaty of Traverse des Sioux. And what I like about this picture, it's probably hard for you guys to see, we've got Dakota Indians on one of the bluffs. I mean, this would look like any bluff along the Mississippi River down along Wabasha area. And we've got the steamboat coming up with probably a lot of new settlers moving into the area. So just acknowledging that people were already here for thousands of years before the Europeans, and actually there's a lot of people that moved into this area that were born in the New England area. They weren't European immigrants. They were born in America and moved westward after this treaty was signed. Okay, so 1851 we start to see this flow of settlers coming in, and within a few years we have multiple towns established along the Whitewater River here. So if we were coming from St. Charles, going through the park, just north of the park, off to the west, Fairwater, right? Nothing left of it today. And we have Elba, a little bit left of Elba today. Keep going where the headquarters for the wildlife management area, that was Whitewater Falls, another town. So that house that the wildlife management area headquarters is in was a farm at one time. Go up a little further, we got Beaver. No sign saying that there was a town there. I wish there could be a sign there at least. And then if we keep going, what's the last town when you get to the Mississippi River on Highway 74? Weaver. Weaver. I mean, there's a couple dozen houses.
Beaver Cemetery sign.
There's the Beaver Cemetery sign, yeah. And it's funny when I take kids out there, they're like, why do people bury beavers? I'm like, that's not guys.
There was a beaver sign in the same garage.
Yeah, I wish there was, I think there would even be more done to mark the old farmsteads. Like the Green Farm, there is a little sign there, but I've been told hunters will shoot up most of the signage. So we have to figure other ways to interpret. Maybe we could have a podcast or something that you pre-download as you drive to the valley. I don't know, but I'd like to do something more. So the larger of these towns at the time was Beaver. So Beaver is where we take a lot of visitors when we do our Ghost Town Cemetery field trip. We start here with a presentation, we caravan up. I can take up to 20 cars because I have 20 radios, and I narrate as we drive up the valley. So it's a really neat way for people to get the history of the valley as we're going along, and then we stop at Beaver Cemetery and learn about some of the folks buried there. So Beaver is what I'm going to focus on for the next, I think, several stories here. So one of the people I interviewed was Elaine Holst, and Elaine is in her 90s. She told me, and her interview was about 2 hours long. It was really hard to keep these condensed because they had a lot of stories to tell. But she told me, in her words, she was born in a shack just outside of Beaver, more closer to Appleby Pool area on the hillside there. And she, as a child, spent her childhood going to Beaver school. So Beaver was her town. And then her parents moved on to a farm up above Elba. And then I asked her how she met her husband, and she said, I just hopped the fence because he was the next farm over. Thought that was kind of cute. So they farmed for years, and then he passed away, I believe, in the 90s. And so this picture right here is actually the old game warden's house. If you turn and you go past Beaver Cemetery, you keep going a little further, there's that turnoff, that gravel road that is Beaver, I forget what that road is called, but it goes back to a big parking lot. You can hike up to the head of Beaver Creek there. So a lot of trout fishermen go back in there. Well, right along that county road there's a trout pond that's fenced off. Yeah, there used to be a house sitting there. That was this house. And her grandfather actually built that house back way up at the head of the valley. That's what he called it. And then later they raised it and moved it. And I think she said they used oxen to raise the house and move it. They moved it up closer to where that county road is today. So her grandparents lived in that house. She experienced many floods in that house. And then later it was used by the game wardens when the state took over the land, and they lived the Tangans, Bob and Sue Tangan. Sue still works in our nature store. Bob was an assistant manager at the wildlife management area. They raised their kids in that house. They lived there for a decade.
So that's the one right on the highway. It would have been right on the highway.
Yeah, there's still cedar trees there. You can tell there was a house there,
Yep, I know
right
that's
next to
it.
where that.
Well, in that picture, it's sitting in Beaver. It got moved, then it must have been moved again because Jeff McHugh moved it there, and then they took it down and used the foundation to put the new house on now.
Oh, interesting.
So I didn't know it used to sit up the valley, but I remember when it sat.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, you've lived
That
your whole
picture
life
is
on that
amazing.
hill. You've watched everything change a little bit. Yeah, so I think that's pretty fascinating. So I take people out to that spot because we go visit that fish pond. And, there's these stories that are very sacred stories of the people that have lived here, right? So it's very reverent. I try to be very respectful when I'm taking people out and showing them these places. Because today, you wouldn't know that people have lived there if somebody wasn't pointing that stuff out to you. Elaine told me that after her husband passed away, when she could still drive, she can't drive anymore, and today she lives in her daughter's house just outside of Wabasha. But she would actually take drives, and I cry every time I tell this story. She would take drive to this spot. The house was long gone, it was tore down. She'd park the car in the spot where the house sat, turn it off, roll the windows down, just close her eyes, because she was lonely, right? And she would imagine she was a little girl again. So, there's a lot of emotion and just lives behind these locations in this valley that today people see as, kind of a playground. This is very personal. So if you go into Beaver Cemetery, you'll see these graves. This is Emanuel Hessig and Arwilda Hessig. These were her grandparents. And she wasn't old enough to have stories of the Dakota people living here, but her grandparents did, so she grew up hearing those stories. And so this is just one, we're going to listen to a just short excerpt of her interview talking about the stories she remembered her grandfather telling her about the Dakota Indians that were here in the valley when they settled here.
Indians would come and they were kind. They didn't make any disturbance. Only when they came, they always raided the chicken house and they take all the eggs. And then they'd go to the head of the valley. That's what Grandpa always called it. The head of the valley, and that's where the Indians would settle in for the summer.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they would leave to go back to, I can't remember, where were those hangings? Remember that?
Oh, Mankato area?
Yeah, because some of that happened to some of them.
Sure.
Yeah, but they had children. My brother always talked about how the Indian children made slides into the creek. There was the Beaver Creek that ran through that total thing, that total farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, interesting stories.
It's neat.
I know. It was wonderful.
Yeah, she had very nostalgic tone to her voice. I'm sure many of you have seen this book, the Historical Society put out back in the 60s, I think, The Beaver Story. This is a fascinating book. The Friends at Whitewater put this on their website as a PDF. We got permission to do that because they're not selling these anymore. So it highlights some of the families that lived in Beaver, and they were able to interview, folks that, going way back to some of the first settlers of the Beaver Village. So this is a really neat resource. Okay, so you guys should all know this. So we drive through there today, really no sign that there was a town there except for the cemetery. If you walk down in where the town used to sit, you can kind of see where roads used to be. You can see some of the foundations of the old bridges. And there's twisted up metal down there. But really, most people don't have an idea there was a village there. So why was it abandoned? Have you all seen this picture before? This is a gully from the Whitewater Valley here. And there's a man right here, there's a man right here, and there's a third man right there. I mean, this is a monstrous gully after one rainy event. So I mean, the erosion, the runoff was incredible. And so think about when these first settlers arrived in the early 1850s, what they saw when they arrived here. I mean, the highlands from St. Charles, Dover, Yoda, up around Elgin, Plainview was prairie, bison were grazing there was elk grazing there. When you drop down onto these steep slopes, you have forested hillsides. Some of the south-southwest facing slopes would have been prairie, oak, savanna. And then down into the valley, you got floodplain forest. And within a decade of the settlers moving in, the land dramatically changes, right? So the prairie is plowed under and crops are planted. Do you guys know what those first early crops were?
Wheat.
Wheat was the big one, right? So I think it was by 1868, Winona was the 4th largest wheat market in the entire country.
I thought Minneaska was actually the largest river port for wheat
In the-
in the world. at
Probably,
that time.
yeah. I mean, there was a lot of wheat moving through this area. Have any of you been up to the Mill City Museum in Minneapolis? It's worth a visit. So my dad's a member of the Minnesota Historical Society, so he gets in free to all these places. And we did a metro vacation a couple years ago, because you never think to go on vacation like to the Twin Cities. So we did. We spent about like 3 or 4 days just touring places around the metro area. And in Minneapolis, they took this old mill, this old flour mill that it had an explosion, a big fire years ago, and it had just been kind of sitting abandoned. And they turned it into this museum to teach about the milling industry in Minnesota. And I was blown away, because that's one thing that, once again, I didn't remember learning about in school. It was a big deal. I mean, wheat was grown all across Minnesota, but this area, especially down here. And that wheat was shipped all across the, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of country out west. There weren't a whole lot of people living out west.
You look at, this is something, I'm in the ag industry, working with a lot of farmers, and we talk all the time about genetics, and working with some of the big lieutenant mills and stuff, we were trying to bring a lot more small grains back into the countryside, and it's a lost art. But
Right.
you look at where General Mills is. Look at even in Iowa, where Quaker Oats, Cedar Rapids. This was all small grain country. Corn and beans, that was irrelevant.
Right.
Everything was small grains because they put up all these big processing plants to accommodate it, and it was the genetics that pushed everything out. Because our corn bean genetics got young earlier and earlier, allowing us to push small grains north. But just look around at all the processing plants. That's why they're here.
There's a book that Plainview, it was Plainview Plateau Plenty or something that was put out in the 50s. I saw a copy of it once and copied a few pages, but there's pictures in there of like 50 teams with shocking or whatever, coming across the field, my God, in a row.
Yeah, this was all small grains country.
There was a mill in Beaver too.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many mills, where there was a creek, there was a mill, it seemed like. They were all over. It'd be neat to see a map showing where all the mills used to be. So yeah, the prairies plowed under, wheat is planted, and actually what happened, I want to say it was actually within maybe a decade or so, they didn't know about rotating crops. And so they actually started getting wheat rust, and they're having issues with the soil. So then they slowly started transitioning over to corn, which we still see grown today. On the hillsides, forests were logged. They needed that timber for building their homes, for fuel for their fires. Some of that timber was shipped to other places out east where they had already depleted their timber resources. So yeah, the landscape changes pretty dramatically in a short period of time. And we think about changing those plants, what's going on under the ground with the root systems. Prairie plants, some of those plants, compass plants, like 12 or 14 foot deep roots. I mean, that's impressive. So the capacity to hold soil in place changes when we change the vegetation on the surface. And that's something that we didn't know at the time. And you can hear people sometimes say, man, people were dumb back then. No, I mean, we've learned a lot since then. A lot of things that we just didn't know at the time. And a lot of the farming practices that were being used then were practices that have been handed down for generations from the old country, not knowing the climate here. Very different climate. We have to adapt how we farm here based on our climate.
Maybe that's not totally true either, because certain European countries, like some of the German immigrants, did things differently.
Sure.
I mean, they would have more livestock and grass and pastures and things like that, so I think it
A little more
was maybe more the
diversified.
English, as you said, that came here first, that
Sure.
were more the wheat.
Yeah, you guys seen this book? You probably mentioned this one before, Sheila. This historical agriculture and soil erosion in the Upper Mississippi Valley Hill Country. That's that Stan Trimble. So he'd been doing research since the 70s. I think he's retired now, but he's a California professor, so he'd come out every summer with students, and they were looking at the erosion, going off of the HAP research from the 40s. But it highlights a lot of places in the Whitewater Valley. And it's not a book everybody needs. It's a textbook. It's
And then
really
also this
technical.
Coon Valley.
Yeah, Coon Valley down in Wisconsin too. But yeah, it's got some really interesting information and pictures in here that, maybe your board should have a copy of it, but not everybody needs one. But that's got some good stuff in there. So yeah, so as we change the way we have vegetation on the landscape, we start to see more runoff, erosion, and that sediment, think about, this goes back to the dripless area, the topography in this region. The soil from up on the highlands ends up coming down into the valleys, right? And it's deposited in our streams. So the streams, the rivers become choked with sediment every time it rains. Even if it's just a slight rain, we start to see flooding. And you guys know the story of Beaver, flooded 28 times in 1938. If you are a farmer and your crop is flooded 28 times, what are you gonna start thinking to yourself? Is this really practical? Like, can I make a living doing this here? So a couple of pictures. I don't know exactly which farm this is, but this is a common scene, in the Whitewater Valley after a rain event. Your farm is flooded. Steve, you recognize these? This is behind the Beaver Tavern, Beaver Saloon, whatever. I've heard it called multiple names. But this is Cal Fremling had this picture. He was a professor at North State University. Wrote a really good book. I should have a copy of it with me, The Immortal River. And it's about basically humans' relationship with the Upper Mississippi River, going way back and then up to today. But this was a picture he actually brought with oftentimes when he did talks, because it's 3 outhouses and they're slowly getting buried. So after you'd have a big flood event, the outhouse would fill and they'd put up another outhouse. And people were trying to adapt, but eventually got to the point where it's just not livable in this area down here. Okay, in the Whitewater Valley, as you're heading up Highway 74, after you cross that intersection at Beaver and the highway turns to gravel, there's a really long ridge that's going to be off to the east. It's about a mile-long ridge. If you ever get a chance to go hike that in the fall, it's just gorgeous. Anybody know what that ridge is? It's named after a family.
Which ridge?
Well, this is Siebenthaler Ridge.
Yeah,
It would
but
actually
which
be
ridge?
like on the other side of the valley from you.
Yeah, it'd be like, you basically be like.
Yeah, I've hiked that. Yeah, there's a big rock that says Siebenthaler Ridge.
If you look at it from Google Earth, it's it looks like a big thumb and a finger pointing out, and Siebenthaler Ridge runs way out, like where the pointer finger would be. So the Siebenthaler family is also a family that I had a chance to interview. It's kind of hard to see in this picture. We got Frank Siebenthaler, Jimmy Siebenthaler, Mikey Siebenthaler, and then their cousin Larry Cronabush, which if you cross over the other side of the county road there, you got the Cronabushville. So these guys their ancestors came from Luxembourg, which is a common story for quite a few families in our area here. And by the time they came in, the valley land had all been kind of taken up, so they had to settle up on the ridge top. We went out to the farm of their, let's see, the Siebenthaler boys actually lived a little bit on the farm. I think Mikey was too young. He was born in St. Charles or Lewiston. But Frankie and Jimmy were born out on the Siebenthaler farm there. And so we went out to that spot where their family had lived. And you guys know when the state got involved and started buying up these farms, they slowly tore the farms down. And so that's kind of a point of contention for some families. I mean, they thought when they sold to the land, this is what I heard from some of these families, this is what Larry Cronabush said, they thought when they were selling to the farm that they were going to get to live out the rest of their life on their farm, not realizing that they were slowly kind of weaned off the farm. Larry's family got to lease the farm for, I think it was 5 years. They were hoping they would get to continue to lease. And then after 5 years, the state said, no, we're gonna kind of phase that out now and tear the property down. So some people are still a little upset about that. So these guys, we went out, we walked the site, they had the old photo albums. I mean, it was really cool to see the pictures of not just what the farm looked like, but their family, the people on the farm at harvest time and threshing time. It's kind of neat to see. But these guys, you know, they're in their 70s and 80s, and they like instantly turned into little boys again. It was really cool to go out there with them and just see. I mean, this is where we put the crayons in the porch that time, and they melted, and Grandpa spanked us because he got so mad. And they're running around telling all these stories. It was really, really cool. So Mike talked about, because they were up on the ridge, their farms weren't flooding. So I said, well, why did you guys end up moving? And so Mike tells the story of why the ridgetop farmers, many of them ended up selling and moving.
But then you've probably seen District 114 school up there. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, we hit that intersection.
Yeah. Down the Trout Valley or Altura, yeah. That was the school for the neighborhood, was District 114. It's now owned by Richard and Karen Aarons out of Lewiston.
Okay.
They bought it and they're kind of trying to preserve it. It used to, maybe 20, 25 years ago, it used to be a corn crib.
Really?
And they took it back. But this is where my mom, I don't think my dad went to school. This is where my mom went to school, 8th grade. They walk over from Cronabush Hill, so that would be where?
So people get flooded out.
The people on the ridge were willing to settle. They would sell. I remember my mom and dad telling the story, well, it's in my mom's book too, where the kids were all little, all of a sudden they were going to start school. So they decided, the state was, what was that, Pittman Robert?
Yeah. Funding
came through, and the state was offering to buy land, and they thought, how can these little kids, we can't afford to drive them to school, all this stuff. So they decided to move to town. And they moved to, I believe, St. Charles. And so then they sold their land to the state. My grandfather, Peter Cronabush, was not happy.
Yeah.
Not happy at all. Because he had sold half his farm to my dad and mom. You got little kids and you're out. And that's a long ways back.
Right.
I mean, for little kids to try to walk to school, there's no school. 114 was closed already. So they moved to town.
So as people left the valley, the school is closed down. If you don't have a way to get your kids, from the middle of the valley into St. Charles, that's kind of hard. It puts you in a tough spot. He mentioned his mom's book. So Olivia Ida Kronebusch Siebenaller, after her husband had passed away, and she just felt like, what can I do with myself? She had all these stories to tell, and they said, hey, Mom, why don't you put them down, and we'll make a book out of them. And so she spent like the last decade of her life writing these stories, and this is an awesome book, but it's not for sale. Actually, the family she wanted to make it for the family. And so I said, well, can I get a copy of it? And they said, well, you have to go on through this place where she had it made. You can make your own book. Anybody can. It's $300 for this book because they didn't print them in bulk. They're just for the family. So, I mean, I guess if you really want a copy and you're willing to spend $300, I was able to convince our friend group that this was worth the investment because there's really good stories in here. And they should put a copy of this with the Historical Society, actually. But, oh man, some great stories. So that play in August, there was a lot of stories from this book that were used in that performance. One thing I learned, another lady I interviewed, she was on hospice, actually. This is another story that makes me cry, but this was just this last fall at the assisted living here in St. Charles. And the hospice nurse calls me and said, this woman, her dying wish is to go to Whitewater. Because as a kid, her dad used to take her there. And that's like her favorite memory. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, yeah, we should make this happen. So I went up and met with her, and she had some interesting stories. But she talked about how she lived on a farm, and she would actually go stay with her aunt in Plainview. Because once you reached 8th grade, if you wanted to continue your education, there wasn't country schools that went past 8th grade. You had to go into town somewhere to go to a high school. I never knew that. That's amazing. So what these families had to do, kids would go live away from home. They'd board somewhere else. Be able to continue their education.
What was her name? Do you remember?
I don't remember her name. I have her story and I have it typed up somewhere, but I can't remember what her name was. Yeah. So yeah, thinking about that, some of the reasons why people left, they weren't necessarily being flooded out, but it's kind of, and with the Siebenallers, one thing Mike mentioned too is that land up there, that Siebenaller Ridge, there's that big boulder that says Siebenallers, and a lot of people go hunting back in there. But right after they sold it to the state for 10, 20 years after the state took ownership of it, it was sanctuary and it was illegal to even walk in it. And that was what really got their dad mad, was that he couldn't even go walk on that land that used to be their farm. So I don't think we have any sanctuary anywhere in the state anymore, but yeah. Okay, it was referenced, Mike mentioned it, 1937, there was a federal act that was passed by Congress, the Pittman-Robertson Act. So how many of you hunt? Are any of you hunters? When you hunt and you purchase your guns and the ammunition, the Pittman-Robertson Act basically created a tax on those things. And that tax money, goes into a federal kitty, and states can apply for that money. And it can only be used for like wildlife habitat restoration work. So after 1937, there's funds available for the state to be able to do more work in the Whitewater Valley. Before that time, it was really hard to find the funding. So actually, 1931, the Isaac Walton League, which is still really active across the country today, the Isaac Walton League actually petitioned the state legislature and said, look what's happening in the Whitewater Valley with all the flooding. Farmers are losing, they can't make a living. Nobody wants to buy their property because it's flooding all the time. Would the state consider purchasing up these flooded farms and turning it into a game refuge? So the Isaac Walton League kind of threw the idea out there. The next year, 1932, Crystal Springs Fish Hatchery, that farm was purchased by the state. So that's the first farmstead in the Whitewater Valley that the state purchased. Then 1933, the Elba Fire Towers were constructed. And that's an interesting story in itself, right? People were purposely burning the hillsides to clear the trees so that the grass would grow so they could raise the hillsides. And that was causing a lot more gullies to form and causing more erosion issues. So they were trying to stop those intentional fires. But it wasn't until like 1938 that we really started to see the state get involved with buying the land because of this federal money that's available. So Larry Cronenbush, who's cousins with those Siebenollers, his mom Margaret, I interviewed her. She was 101. She was going to turn 102 the next week. And she passed away like 6 months after I interviewed her. There's been about 6 people that have passed away before I even got a chance to interview them. So we're losing these stories. I really encourage people to interview your parents and grandparents, and sometimes we don't think about that till they're gone. She talked for over 2 hours, and finally Larry said, I think you need to go because she needs to rest. She was so spunky though. So they actually farmed, her and her husband, Alphonse, was actually Olivia Cronenbush's brother. Yeah, sorry, too much information maybe, but she's referenced in Olivia's book too. And so they leased back a farm that was one of their family farms on Oak Ridge and farmed it for, I said, 5 years. And they had to implement conservation practices once the state took over, so they had to do terraces and contours and certain things. And this was new, like the farmers didn't do that before. And they were fine with that. She said that was no problem. And so they were a little frustrated when after 5 years the state said, we're not going to renew leases anymore. We're going to kind of phase out these farms. But her story is an interesting one. It has to do with something that happened November 11th, 1940, on that farm on Oak Ridge.
That's just a story when you had the chickens in the house. Oh God, yeah, I'll never forget that. That was something. We raised coupons. Capons, the big chickens. And God, we took such good care of them. And Elvis even told Jeanette if she would water them with that hose, and then he would get her a bicycle. And so we took good care of the chickens. Well, this morning, it was a day just like this, the sun was out and everything, and we left the capons out of the coop. Well, all of a sudden, here come this storm.
You went to town, didn't you?
No, we were home.
Oh.
We were home, and it was sleet and ice. It just hit you. And the week quick went out. I was 7 months pregnant. And to go out there and catch those chickens and throw them in the coop. And their whole bodies were coated with ice. They couldn't move their feathers, their wings, or anything. So we went, and as many as we could get, we went and threw them in the coop. Elvis says either they'll live or die. We put it back in there. And then 2 of them we thought were dead. Elvis says, take them in the house and lay them. We had a furnace in the floor. He says, lay them over that to thaw out. Now wring their neck after a while. He said, we're gonna eat them. So we had finished swallowing them in there, and went back in the house. The chickens come to, and they were gone. We chased them. Can you imagine me 7 months chasing chickens? But then we threw back in the coop, and we sold every one of them. But they had the toes and this part of their foot, but these were froze off. All their toes.
Frostbite.
And none of them, the roosters, their combs were froze off.
Oh.
But otherwise, we sold every one of them. Yeah.
What about the rest of the animals?
Yeah, she had a lot of great stories. So that's the Armistice State Blizzard. You guys know Kruger, there's a Kruger State Forest area that's just west of Kellogg. It's a nice spot. I don't think many people know about it. It's got a nice campground there. But that's named after Willis Kruger, and he was a game warden just out of training. Brand spanking new out of training when this blizzard hit. And he actually was assigned to go find the bodies of all the dead hunters in our area along the Mississippi River there. So Wabasha County did a really nice history book. It was free at the library. You could pick up copies of them at the library. And there's a whole section on Willis Kruger and his stories from that event. I can't imagine. There's a lot of hunters that died out.
The Kruger's on 81, right?
Yeah, just west of Kellogg.
Yeah, it's the cut across from 60 to 50.
Yeah,
it's that cut
yeah.
across from that.
Yeah, it's a nice
Actually,
little
there's
forest unit. It's got
farm
shade.
down there. I've worked with them for years, Hawkins.
Oh,
Farm
okay.
and Clark, and they farm a lot of that down in through there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat area.
My dad told
Oh,
me
yeah.
stories of the Armistice State Blizzard, only luckily no one was hunting or anything and they were home, but like 65-degree day and then bam, he said the chickens got blown right up against the hen house.
Oh, jeez.
So they had to go grab them and throw them in, but
Mhm.
they didn't lose anything. But he said they had to work till midnight before they got everything
That's great.
batted down.
Wow, yeah.
So, is that Margaret Cronebush, is that where Larry lives now, or is this out on the other Cronebush side, on the farm, way out on Oak Ridge, or is this where Larry lives now?
No, so
Just
it's
north of
where
Altura.
they used to live, out on Oak Ridge.
Out on the ridge.
Yeah, it's
That's part of the original Cronebush farm where, what's his
Yeah,
name?
it's where the uncle made the liquor, the moonshine. If you
Yeah.
ever heard any of those stories, it's
Yeah.
that farm. It's behind the original. Like Olivia grew up in the big one. There's another farm just off to the south of there.
Because Larry lives just north of Altura now.
Yeah, I went to his house actually to interview him.
Yeah,
too.
but that's not
No,
that farm.
no.
This is the one out there.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Leroy Cronebush now lives the original farm, is what I'm assuming. Yeah.
Well, the places we went were tore down because they went with them.
Right, but I think the original land is where Larry
Oh,
Larry
sure, they
lives.
still farm up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how many Cronenbushes and Siebenallers I run into.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them, because there was like 14 on one side and 16 on the other or something. Like, there's a lot of descendants. So we're going to transition a little bit more into the park history now. In 1917, there was an effort, to establish Whitewater State Park, but something major globally was going on in 1917, World War I. So there was no spare funds to just, let's start a park. But that did get a lot of people kind of moving in this effort to establish the park. And there had been several national parks already established by 1917. So the editor of the St. Charles newspaper at the time, L.A. Warming was his name, he was a great photographer. And so he actually came down into the valley. So after the state said, no, we don't have funding to establish a park, he said, well, I'm going to do something to help kind of build the lobby support for establishing a park. He came down and started taking all these pictures. He put together a book. I don't have a copy of the original here. I think it's right here. Out here on the wall by the bird feeding station, there's pictures from the book. So this has also been scanned, and the Friends of Whitewater has it on their website. You can look at all the original pictures. But it's called The Paradise of Minnesota, the Proposed Whitewater State Park. And he's really just showing, pictures worth 1,000 words, what the possibilities were down here as far as a state park. Just a beautiful area, right? So I interviewed Jill Bierkamp. We're not actually going to listen to this one because I can hear the kids starting to show up. But she's the current editor of the St. Charles newspaper, so she did some research. She actually went to school to be a historian, so she loves researching. So she was basically going through all these old newspaper articles and telling the story of LA warming. And Jill was really pivotal last year in just getting the word out about the history of the park and the things that were going on here in the park. She does a great job. So he creates this book, gets it out. It's all the old newspapers. You can go to the Winona Newspaper Project and you can look at all the old newspapers. You can see there's like an ad in a lot of the old papers in 1917, 1918 promoting this book so that they could raise money. I think it was $1.50 for the book. And then 1919, the bill goes before the legislature again, and that time it's approved. So, you know, we'd like to thank L.A. Warming for his hard work in getting the word out. But the park then, 1919, it actually really set pretty simple. There wasn't a whole lot of infrastructure work done in the park until the 1930s, when the New Deal created a couple pivotal programs that really impacted the park. So what was those? There's two of them.
WPA was one.
WPA, and what's the other one? CCC, yeah. So the Civilian Conservation Corps for young men ages 18 to 25 who are unemployed. They had to meet low income standards. And then the WPA comes in a couple years after the CCC, and the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, was typically more skilled men. They did hire women in other parts of the country, but not here at Whitewater. It was men with more skilled, like stonemasons, electricians, plumbers, because they actually do the work on creating like the restrooms, building the arch bridges that we had in the park before the floods took those out. So these guys were pivotal in creating the infrastructure that we still use today in a good portion of the park. Fred Johnson, in the middle here, was in Camp 2709, and as he grew up, he actually would write stories for the Historical Society and other organizations about his experience being in the CCC at Whitewater. He came back and led some programs in the 1990s and early 2000s. Dave Palmquist had him come in a few different times. And then this is Jim Bishop, who was also a CCC boy. So kind of neat that Dave got to meet them. When I started here, they had already passed away, so I never got to meet them. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from one of Fred's articles that he wrote for the Minnesota Historical Society. He says, "One can only speculate what would have happened to thousands of young men who, without the CCC, would have spent their early productive years in enforced idleness. The Corps was not a handout, it was a fair exchange. At a time when it was desperately needed, we were offered the opportunity to work for the preservation and improvement of America. And while the pay was not high by today's standards, the greater reward came in the elevation of the human condition. The CCC member felt good about himself and what he was doing. In those difficult days, that was enough. I believe, measured upon any yardstick, the CCC was a successful program, and the country and its people are better because it existed." And Dave said it was really cool when they'd be out walking through like the picnic area, and they'd see a little boy taking a drink from the stone fountain that they built, that they would actually start crying. Because it's like, we left a legacy. We're impacting people still today. It's pretty cool. In the 1930s and 40s, there were some big events held here in the old golf course area, which is today a restored prairie. And this is where we held the theater performances in August. These were centennial pageants. So they started in the 30s. They were to commemorate the territorial centennial when Minnesota first became a territory. And then they kind of evolved and grew bigger. The local 4-H program coordinators were involved in helping basically write the script and coordinate the pageant. And it was a big deal. They actually brought in folks from the Red Earth Indian Reservation. And it's hard to see, there's teepees and things set up. And I don't know today, by today's standards, how politically correct these pageants were, but they were trying to reenact the settlement of Minnesota.
Is that at the bottom of the hill to the left? Or where is that?
Yeah, so the highway
down
up
to the valley.
the highway
Coming to the
going up to
valley,
St.
down
Charles
the
is
hill,
here.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
on the
there's
left.
still a stone building there. You turn off to
It
the
goes
left
back
and
to
the
Camp
left.
Whitewater back
Yep,
in there,
yep,
right? Yep, off the left-hand side, the bridge,
Right.
all through there.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of hard to envision.
Yeah,
where
that's
these
what I
took
figured,
place.
but. Yeah.
But some of the newspapers said there was
Right
about
up here.
15,000 spectators that participated in these events. 15,000, can you imagine? So these were
It's a lot
big-
more overgrown today.
Big deals. It is, yeah.
Yeah,
it
like
is.
that wood line's really pushed it.
Yep. And we're not going to listen to this interview either, but Anna Howard Munson, she's in her 90s as well. She was just a little tiny girl when that very first pageant took place in 1933, and her aunt Mildred Zebo was the Winona County 4-H program coordinator at that time. So her aunt helped write the original script. So she got to go to that very first pageant, but she was so little. All she remembers is like oxen pulling a covered wagon coming down over the hill. She had to sit in the car. She was told to stay in the car because there were so many people. And her dad was instrumental in helping set up and coordinate the event. So it was kind of interesting just to hear her remembrances of all the work that went into planning those pageants. So we have the CCC and the WPA camps here. Then the camp was used by a lot of different youth groups. Camp Whitewater's been coming here since 1947, which is awesome.
Yeah, my kids all went there.
Yeah, Boy Scouts have been coming here since the early 50s. Lots of different groups using that camp. But then during World War II, the last year of the war and the year after the war, those 2 summers, that camp was used for something else. I'm sure you guys all know this.
Prisoners of war.
The German prisoner of war camp, yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing all the local like legends and myths that have like evolved from this camp being here. Because I swear everybody around here, their uncle drove the bus. That's what everybody, my uncle drove the bus for the German prisoners. Like, how many buses were going? But Ernst Kohlig was one of the POWs. He actually stopped in here this summer that Dave Palmquist started here in 1974. Ernst had stopped in. He was here with his family, showing them where he'd been held prisoner. And so Dave Palmquist was just out of college, but he said, you know what? Should I interview you? Can I get a tape recorder? And he said, sure. So he interviewed him, I think, for over an hour. So that full interview will also be archived.
So that was back where Camp Whitewater is now?
No, that's where, so in the South Picnic area,
Yep.
that used to be the camp. And Camp Whitewater started out there too. Something happened to that camp though. I think that's the next slide. Anyhow, Ernst, we don't have many pictures, right? Because it was actually, I was told against the Geneva Convention to photograph these prisoners, so it was illegal to do so. But we had a program here a few years ago, and the assisted living from IOTA came in. So it was cute. We had people with walkers, that was the whole front row here. And one lady said, I have a picture of the POWs that worked on our farm. And we were like, what? So she actually let us make a copy of her picture. But there's at least two, if not three POWs in this picture here. They weren't issued a uniform. They had to wear the clothes they were captured in, and they just wrote PW on them. And so we've never been able to find anything like that. Ron Manzo up at the Plainview History Center had some articles from the canning factory, and it showed a couple POWs during the pea packing time. But other than that, we haven't been able to find any, so that was a big deal. So in Ernst's interview, the snippet I had put in here, it's kind of hard to understand, so I'll just sum it up. He was asked what the food was like, because he had heard that they were given really bad, poor food. And a lot of the settlers in the area were German heritage, and would feed these guys, actually, which was also supposedly against the law. But he said, no, the food was great. We actually had more food than we really needed when he first arrived. And cigarettes, and they would even let them have beer. Like, he said they were treated really nicely. But then once the Allied forces got into Germany and into Europe deep enough to get into those death camps and really see what was going on, and the word got back to the US, they changed the way they fed these guys. They went, based on the Geneva Conventions, they went with the minimum amount that they had to give them. So the food changed, and he said you could tell it in camp instantly. Food changed, it was poorer quality, it was the minimum amount of ration that they were supposed to be able to get. So when they would go out to the farms and be working, because you could hire these POWs, right? If you could find a way to get them to and from the camp, you could hire them to come and work on your farm. The Siebenallers actually had them dig their septic line. So they did all kinds of work out in the local communities. And so oftentimes these folks would say, oh, you're not going to eat that. Feed that to the dogs. Come in and eat with us. So there's a lot of stories of them eating at the table with the farmers. So back to that location where that camp was. Yeah, this is Camp Whitewater from, well, this is 1953, but I've seen a 1947 photo too. That one's 1947. And so this is the old camp. You can see the big chimney there and the original barracks. But that camp, doesn't exist anymore. 1953 would have been the last time they used the camp at that location.
You said that's in the South Picnic area?
South Picnic area. What do you think happened to that?
Flooded?
You'd think flooding, right? It was a tornado. And I actually almost hate telling campers this because they're like, dang it, tornadoes, we thought we were safe from tornadoes down here. But tornadoes can bounce. And yeah, it literally, this was a Mother's Day tornado, 1953, bounced right down and hit the camp. So there was only 4 remaining buildings out of there was over a dozen to begin with. And then those were auctioned off, disassembled, and moved. There is one, if not 2, in St. Charles. Across from the A&W on Highway 14 there, if you look across, there's a barn with a lean-to, and that lean-to is one of these buildings.
That's what that is.
Yeah, isn't that cool? And it's been,
now I gotta go look at that.
it's been pretty preserved.
My shop
They put
is just
tin
right on
over
the
it,
other side of it.
yeah, kind of neat. There was one, Orinoco City Park also had one,
Really?
and it got really moldy and stinky, and they just tore it down a couple of years ago.
Where was that one at?
At Orinoco, at their city park there. Because we went to look at it because we were hoping maybe we could bring it back here. It was just, it was so moldy and just icky, so they demolished that one. But supposedly there's a couple others out there on farms somewhere in the area. And then we talked about the Boy Scouts. They held their big jamborees here in the 50s and 60s. So my husband's family's from Rushford, my father-in-law, and then would have been my grandfather-in-law. They came out here for these camporees because my grandfather-in-law, I guess, was like a scout leader. These were a big deal. They would assemble on Sunday morning of their camporee. They would assemble out on the golf course for their big flag ceremony and their award ceremony. And up to 6,000 spectators would come to watch because they did like almost a military style parade when they marched. They had all the local marching bands and baton twirlers, and it was a big deal. There is a video snippet of this on the Friends of Whitewater Facebook page because my father-in-law attended one of them in 1960 and they actually filmed part of it. And then up on Eagle Point, they hung the big Boy Scout, whatever that symbol is. It's hanging down from Eagle Point. It's kind of cool to see. So we brought back the Scouts this past year. We did a reunion, a camporee reunion. We had 400 boys from this region that stayed. Many of them had never been to Whitewater before, so that was kind of neat. And then we had old-timer scouts sharing their stories of what it was like to come to camp here. So there's just a few scenes from the old camporees. And one more, and then maybe I'm going to wrap it up. So anybody done some hiking in the park? We've got a lot of nice lookouts. We've got Chimney Rock. This is Eagle Point that looks out over the old golf course. This is Inspiration Point. That's one of my favorite places in the park. Which of these do you think is the most popular overlook when people come and go hiking?
I like Inspiration Point.
I love Inspiration Point. It's so neat. And it's kind of scary to get out to it, but the view, you don't see...
It wraps.
Yeah.
It wraps.
Panoramic, and you don't see signs of like humans.
Anything. Nothing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Tall trees.
Actually, so Chimney Rock was probably the most popular just because it's you can do it in 40 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. If
Up the hill and
yeah.
make this loop.
And it's at the cave. Kids like climbing into the cave. So that's really the most popular trail, even though there's, I think, prettier trails out there. And oftentimes when people hike up Chimney Rock, it's stone steps going up to one side, so they think, oh, the CCC did this. It wasn't the CCC. I mean, that's always been a trail, but it didn't have stone steps until 1970s, early 80s. So these three guys were on the rock crew. They helped put those steps in. And Joe Rice in the middle and Ken Geezer, I mean, they worked here up until just a few years ago. They just recently retired. So they called themselves the Rock Crew. And I interviewed both of them, but I got Joe Rice's interview on here. Oops. And I mean, I just want to give them credit because the CCC gets all the credit. The CCC did great stuff, but these guys worked for, 78 to 83, that's quite a few years. He told me they tried all these different ways of putting these steps in because you're going up a steep bluff. So they tried wheelbarrows, that didn't work. They tried tractors, the tractor actually rolled downhill into the river. Like they basically had to carry everything by hand. And so he said they laid one step a day. They had to carry the stone. They got the stone from Bison's Quarry in Winona. And then they had to pick stones that were the right shape. And then they would carry them all the way up the hill, carry the concrete, the mixed concrete next to water, mix it all up there, lay a step, and then the day was over. They had to go clean up and leave. One a day. He said their shoulders were ripping out. And when I interviewed him 2 years ago, he had just had shoulder surgery. So I was like, I wonder what that's related to. So something to think about when you're out hiking and exploring the park. Like what are the stories behind why we have the facilities we have? There's a lot of work that's gone into them. So busy park, like I said last year, 450,000 visitors. And a lot of these families have been coming for years. This family, Andrea Richards, she's been coming since 1994. Now she's coming, these are her daughters and granddaughter. So they have these rituals, these things that become traditions for their family. And you hear this when you talk to all the different families at Eagle Park. They all have their own different traditions. One of the things they like to do, they set up camp first, then they all run down to the beach, and then they hold hands, they line up at the beach, they hold hands, and they run together as a chain into the water. It's kind of cute, think of these different traditions. They started coming here when Andrea was getting divorced, and they actually come with some of her co-workers. They're all teachers. And they were all going through divorce, and they said, you know what's something we can create as a family tradition where we don't necessarily have to have the men to do it, and it's something that our family can look forward to. We can spend time together and have this really neat experience. And so they decided we're going to go camping at Whitewater every year. So these are just really cool stories how we are helping people.
She lives south of St. Charles, isn't she?
What is that?
She lives south of St. Charles. Is that Dean Richards' wife?
I'm not sure. I know we taught in Winona,
Okay.
so I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm just going to whip through this. St. Charles, 6th grade's been coming out here since the 60s using the group camp because the one guy, now I forget his name, he's the guy that, Brogan. He does the chicken. You can hire him to come and do the big chicken for events. Yeah, he's been coming as a chaperone, but he came when he was a kid, and he's got to be like late 60s now. So they have a lot of really interesting stories of camp here. 4-H has been using the park, just like I said, the Scouts. These are my daughters, which this one's in Spain right now. She's in college, and that one's a junior up at Plainview. So just think of the impact this place has on the children that come here. You know, they're getting to experience nature, they're getting to experience leadership. These guys, well, she's been a 4-H counselor she did that for 5 summers. The other one, as soon as she was old enough, she's like, I don't want to go to camp anymore. So not everybody appreciates the camp experience, but really, it's a memorable part of childhood for a lot of people. And then flooding's been a huge part of our history too. 2007 was our biggest flood on record, right? You guys all know that historic flood, but flooding has been, you know, that's why this valley is here. That's what's carved this valley. And in the 70s, there was huge floods that took out the stone arch bridge. There used to be a 3-arch bridge by the old golf course, beautiful, and it was destroyed in a flood. There used to be CCC cabins that you could rent. They were stone cabins. Those were destroyed in floods. Our campgrounds have moved. Our campgrounds have changed. If you've been coming here for a long time, you've seen that. They've moved because with the floods, we have to read, okay, what's considered a floodplain now? And what's a safe spot to let people camp? Gooseberry Glen is no longer a campground. We phased that out. We're lucky nobody died there in 2007 because that was completely washed out.
I was gonna ask, that happened, they came up, so I lived in Ontario when that happened, and was up all night, obviously dealing with water, different peoples and rescues and fire department and everything else. And was there, because it happened at night, and even by the next day where the water was and it began to reside very, very quickly, was there a lot of pictures? Did they get a lot of pictures of that or not?
We have a ton of pictures just from that next day, nothing at night, like catching like the wall of water. So we have an alarm system, right, a flood gauge alarm system, but back in 2007, the internet wasn't the way we have it now, and it was all satellite, and when it was really stormy, you wouldn't get that satellite, so the alarm system didn't even trigger. So we were really like, that's what Gene is talking about in this excerpt. He was on and watched that night, and he just had to make the call. The water's rising quick, we're gonna evacuate the campground.
Oh, that was a crazy night.
Luckily we did it when we did, because we were told that
sleep for 2 days.
15 minutes after everybody got out of here, campers were pushed up into the trees over at Lazy D, like trailers. So I mean, we are really lucky nobody died here. It could have been a disaster. Yeah, but there's a lot of damage. We probably have several hundred pictures of, from the next day of what it looked like in the park. But yeah, we don't really have anything of like when it was cresting, because like you said, that was at night.
Yeah, just like the wall that came through Crystal Valley, by the spring there and everything, all that. I have a picture of my son. He was 3, standing. The next morning we went down, and I picked him up from the neighbors because he stayed overnight there. And we just brought him over there because we were up all night. And I have a picture of him standing on the highway at the bottom of the hill, looking into elbow when the whole thing was covered with water. And he's standing right on the highway, right where the water starts. All the Crystal Springs, it's just all you see is water, all the way into elbow.
Right.
It's pretty nuts.
Definitely hope I don't have to live through another one of those. That's scary. I'm going to kind of stop it here because I can keep going and going and going, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot more here. But if you guys did not get last year one of these books, we do have some left. So we kind of revamped that Paradise of Minnesota book, and we put pictures in from 1917 all the way up to 2019. So it's got basically, as the park is being built and evolving, we've got pictures to show that. So if you didn't get one of these last year, did you get one of these?
I think I do have that.
Do you? Okay. We're saying one per family if we can, because we only have a limited number of these.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then this is also on the Friends and the Whitewater State Park webpage as a PDF too. So thank you guys for letting me share with you. And
is there more to this? Is this just like a condensed version of what you just did?
There's a few more slides, and we didn't listen to all the interviews. When we listened to each of the audio clips, it actually is a little over an hour.
It's really fascinating.
But I will travel around. Every time I give this, there's somebody that says, hey, can you come to our Legion or our church or whatever? So yeah, if there's other outlets, let me know. I'm going to go out here though because I can hear these rugrats.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have fun. Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we gotta approve the consent items. Sheila, got anything here?
Yes, the consent items, the bills payable, we have for Winona County for my time working on the Whitewater, that's over $6,000, and also for a separate check for the computer, and it's working great. University of Minnesota, that's for Jake's time on for working with farmers under the 319 nitrogen reduction grant. And then I have 4 cover crop payments. This is from 2019 for farmers in Olmsted County. And then the MCIT payment was approved last month, but I had to pay electronically, and I didn't know the exact amount until after the last meeting. So that was $13.54.
Any questions? If not, a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Motion by Josh, second by Rich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Board reports. Anybody got anything? We gotta move this along.
I didn't even make our last meeting, I was sick, so.
Anything? If not, we'll just keep going here. Steve?
Yeah, at our last county board meeting, the Mississippi Winona Crescent watershed, one watershed, one plan came before Winona County Board. So I see it's on our, it's at the tail end of our agenda too, isn't it? Okay, so I guess I just want to pass over what board discussion was on that. I can do it at that time if you want, but.
Let's do it then.
Okay.
Okay, if not, keep going here. We're up, new year, election of officers. Any thoughts? Leave same?
Who's what, where? At least have a
We
discussion.
left
Now,
everything the same
yeah.
with watershed, soil and water, just because, whatever, but we added a few more alternates for like going to county board or whatever, just in case someone couldn't make it. That's basically all we did for.
So,
Do it? No, I'm good, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, does everybody understand who's
Madam
what?
Chair,
I'm
Steve
cheers.
Vice,
Ice.
Secretary Treasurer is Josh,
Josh.
alternate Secretary and Treasurer is Lynn.
Okay.
Well, okay, we need a motion to, motion by Josh, second by Lynn to leave as is. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Financial update, Sheila.
Okay, at the end of December, our checking and money market totals, after taking out received not earned, those were all spent by that time with grants finishing up, were $70,099. And by the end of January, that was some more checks that cleared from our last meeting, and that was down to $68,859. And I do have more anticipated deposits coming in.
So how much deposits are coming in? 60 seems like a little lower than.
Yeah, it is. I have, well, big ones, and I just received an email on this yesterday, $25,916 from the nitrogen reduction grant. That was a reimbursement payment.
Yeah, because we've been paying out, now we finally got paid.
Right, so that comes quarterly. And then with the new grant that we got, $95,775 coming in for that.
That won't be up.
I don't, I got a little memory history here. I just want to make sure we're cash flow.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to be,
That gets her back up.
there's other things happening in our world that just want to make sure we're good.
Agreed.
All right, that sounds good. All right, next,
Did see today.
2020 rental agreement.
Okay, I got, and this was brought up at the last Winona County SWC meeting. It's time to renew the rental agreement that we have with the SWCD, so that's in your packets, and they approved it and signed it on the 13th. And this will be for the rental agreement, and it's from March 19th through March 19th of 2021.
Okay.
And
It's like about $2,500 total.
I wasn't there for
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
yeah. Okay. So
Any-
moved.
All right, motion by Josh, second by Lynn. Any other questions? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Rental agreement approved. E, 2019 nitrogen reduction grant. Okay, grant amendment approval.
Okay, one of the things that came up is right now, the nitrogen grant agreement goes until the end of August 2021. And So I asked for an extension because there was at least one farmer that's participating in the cover crops that was not able to put it in that first year and wanted to have a third year of doing cover crop incentives. And so the latest I could get was just a 1-month extension
See,
because this
from the
grant.
31st August to
Yeah,
September.
and so this farmer intends to plant before the end of September, that third year. So that's all I was able to get because it's a federal grant, and they had some hard and fast end dates. But anyway, that's the only change with the amendment, was changing the end date of the grant.
Okay.
So what's all the verbiage of cutting all the?
Yeah, I was
that's-
wondering about that too.
That, I was told that's how we do the amendment. Anything that's not, there was no need to reiterate because we still have the current grant.
It's backwards. What's changed is open, what stays the same is crossed out.
And that was kind of an EPA thing, and I was kind of confused about it too.
So who did the draft language change?
The EPA. And then it came through the MPCA, and Stephanie Nettle reviewed it and approved it as to form. And when I sent the amendment to her, I also sent for her reference the original agreement. So she viewed that as well as the work plan.
Okay. A lot of stuff for 1 month, right?
I know.
Any questions there? Not approve it?
So move.
A motion by Josh, second by James, to approve the grant amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Now, payments for cover crop payments. We have 4.
Yes, we have 4 from Olmsted County, and
Was that the 900s back here? Right?
yes,
Right.
yes, those are the ones that we had on the list, and I can certainly pass them around, and they all completed. Angela, oh, I'm sorry, Lynn,
That's okay.
I'm gonna do them first. And so they just didn't have their paperwork in time for the December 13 meeting. That's why we didn't have it. And then the other farmer that wasn't able to plant is planning to do spring plant of cover crops.
Okay, any questions? Everybody want to look at them? We want to approve them all? Look at them for this.
Those are the checks.
Is Pat the one doing it in the spring?
No, no. I think it's rent.
Okay, I think we can all approve them all in one shot. Do I have a motion to approve the 4 cover crop payments? Motion by Josh,
Second.
second by Rich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, carries. Okay, we got that.
Okay.
F, surface water assessment grant update.
Okay, the next one is the surface water assessment grant update, and this is doing monitoring of 8 stream sites and 2 lake sites in Lake Winona to assist with the watershed approach for monitoring water quality. And so this would be, the grant agreement right now is just between the Whitewater and the MPCA. Once this is approved, then I have to work out sub-agreements with Winona County, Root River SWC, and Wabasha SWC, because they are partners that are listed in the work plan. But the agreement explicitly says, don't do the sub-agreements until this is executed. And so what is included in the packets was a template grant agreement I am still waiting for the real final grant agreement. Talked with Stephanie Nuttall and also at the MPCA, and they says I will receive it by the end of this week. And she says she will approve it, review it as to form. It does not need the chair's signature. I can sign it. I have to go into the SWIFT account and sign it electronically. So right now, I'm just looking for the approval. The work plan that's included in your packets is the final approved work plan.
This one.
Yes.
What page is that?
41.
Okay. That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's where it starts. And so what's in front is the joint powers agreement. That's the template. That's why there's font that's in red, because those things will be taken out. It just tells you, put name of what LGU here. So that's why it's a template grant agreement. But the work plan, which is approved.
Is page 59, is that the area map?
Page, yeah, I think so. Yes, there is an area map on here. Yes.
So we're working with 3 authorities, Whitewater, and then the Winona area, and then there's a third one down by the Crescent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. And that's the one the River SWCD is going to monitor.
And who's implementing the Lake Winona one?
Winona County and me.
Okay. So have we done this kind of thing before? I mean,
We've done
Yes, we
screening,
have.
but I know we've done screening, but I don't ever do the lakes in Winona.
No,
I mean,
we did not, but
if we were talking
we
about
did.
Silver Lake or Lake Pepin at the county seats of the other counties, that would seem an odd involvement for this organization, for Whitewater.
Well, we've done grant agreements that included the Mississippi River Winona before, which includes more than just the Whitewater. And we've done monitoring before, which included, primarily what I was involved with was when we did the E. coli monitoring, and then we did, I believe it was 3 sites on the North Branch, 3 sites on the Middle Branch, and 3 sites on the South Branch. And that was as a part of the watershed assessment.
But that was all in the Whitewater watershed.
Yes. That
So
was,
I guess
yes.
this seems like an expansion to the proposed new 1-1 plan. This would be the area that would cover, correct?
It would.
Winona, La Crescent, Mississippi,
Yes.
Winona, La Crescent.
Yep, yep.
So, I mean, to me, it feels like an expansion of this board before we've really discussed or approved 1-1 Winona.
But this is
Mississippi.
not connected with one watershed, one plan.
I get that. I guess it feels strange to me that this board is working on agreements on Lake Winona. It feels just as odd as if we were working on Silver Lake or Lake Pepin. That's not in this watershed.
Well, this is for a part of the watershed.
A new
Approach.
watershed that
Right.
that we're not part of at this point.
Right, right. But this is a part of the watershed approach. The MPCA does monitoring every 10 years. So for 2020 and 2021, it includes doing, and these are called the chemical sites. So they have these measuring bacteria, nitrates, and TSS, or the sediment. And so doing those parameters, and then the MPCA is doing the biologic assessments, where they're going to several sites throughout the watershed and determining what the biologic or what the habitats are like for the fish and for the macroinvertebrates, and then we'll count them and see what IBI scores they have to determine.
What's the involvement of Houston County? Is there any sex down there?
Yes, there's the
So
one.
that's the one that's off
The
the
star
map?
that's off the Winona County map.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that. I didn't realize that was, the star
Yep.
that's not on the map is,
The star that's below, yes.
Below the number.
so that's in Houston County.
Yes.
So is the idea here that everybody cooperatively works together?
Yes.
That's what, you know, the
Yes.
second paragraph here, it's not us doing it, it's just our part of what's being
Right,
done. So
administrative.
we're just doing our little section here in Whitewater. They're gonna do their own, they're gonna do their own, we're gonna do their own. So we don't really have any outreach or anything. We're not saying what happens. We're just worried about our little area in this
Right.
collective group, is that right?
Right, and there is an outreach component to recruit volunteers under the Citizen Stream Monitoring Program.
But it's not spearheaded by us. This isn't us doing all this. It's just our portion of that. So is everybody collectively applying for a $56,000 grant, or are
No.
we applying for a $56,000?
This is coming to the Whitewater,
Yeah.
and then most of that 56,000 is going to us for administration and to our partners to buy the equipment that's needed. Some of a big chunk of it is going towards lab.
So we
fees.
would be the administrator of it, but everybody else would cooperate with us.
Right,
But we only do our part, and then they do their parts amongst it. So they could equally apply for this grant and become an administrator and then come back to us and say, hey, we would like you to be part of it too? Or how does that work? Do you see what I'm asking?
yeah, and.
Is it
apart-
kind of one of those where somebody has to take the ball?
Mhm.
Right.
Right, and
Someone's got it.
MPCA, for each watershed area, they wanted just one agreement.
One
They didn't
administrator.
want
Right.
multiple agreements.
So technically, Wabasha SWCD could apply for this grant. If they get the grant, they could be the administrator, come to us and say, hey, your little portion here on this map, we need you to do this, we're gonna pay you for your time, just the same, right? So anybody could really do it. Okay. I'm just trying to understand. it.
Yeah, and we kind of got
Who
together
applied?
and said, okay, how do we envision that we could?
Sometimes I
Get
think
these
it's
done.
maybe about who has staff time too,
Mhm.
is why
Right.
those decisions are made, from what I understand, on our
Right.
soil and water. I mean, if we don't
Right.
think we have time to do something, then we see if we can work something out.
So the benefit to us would be, what?
Revenue.
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 And
Um,
just exposure,
and,
our
yeah.
name's still there.
Yep, and I was looking to this to beef up citizen involvement in the citizen stream monitoring program.
So what's the part of the contract, I'm looking at, I think it's page 54, with Winona County?
The grant agreement starts on page 42, and that's the template agreement.
So
and that's-
we're getting all the money, and then this part of the contract is they're coming to us for a portion of that money to use in their area?
The agreement for today is the agreement that we have with the MPCA for that 56,000. Then once that's executed, then I'm assuming at the next meeting, I would have the sub-agreements with,
So is the 56,000 only used in Whitewater, or is it used throughout this entire?
throughout.
So the reason that on page 54, why Winona County, Blue Overhog, and so
Right,
that they're in here because they're going to then,
they're partners.
with what we're signing and them being on our contract, have they authorized, and are we authorizing a partnership here? I mean, that,
This is, well, what you're seeing now is the work plan, and that has been approved by the MPCA. So that we will do this administering, and then these are our partners.
But Ted, I think what Steve's asking is have they agreed to be a partner?
Yes,
Is that what you're
yes, they
asking?
have.
yeah.
It appears to me we're being the fiscal agent and administrator of this grant.
Right.
Then we work out the agreements with these other groups.
Mhm.
But
And,
we've never had any interaction with these other groups.
well, they are government groups, aren't they? So what,
Now, I don't know whether Houston County has read any of this, or I'm
Yes, they
I'm
have.
authorizing to spend money in their county. It seems like it's morphing beyond the scope of what I've seen on Whitewater. The Whitewater Joint Powers Board, in my view, was formed to manage grants within the Whitewater, and this seems like it's morphing into something more. I mean, I don't know whether a grant comes along that could be Silver Lake, could be Lake Pepin, and I don't know that my county board is gonna support spending county funds, Winona County funds on those projects. I mean, I think I feel like we're speaking for a lot of people here when we sign this.
No, I disagree. We've done things outside these limits. The one that comes to mind is the farmer ag certainty one. We went beyond the Whitewater region with ag certainty,
Well, the program expanded beyond the Whitewater area.
and we were part of that.
You know, we were the pilot.
We were the pilot, but then we expanded a bit in the Whitewater, so
Well,
it's not.
When they expanded, they left they took it from this board and expanded it.
Well, what is, I guess here's my question, Steve, is I see it a little bit different. I see it that we're a fiscal agent, no different than SWCD, when we're a fiscal agent for, right now, the one watershed plan that we are, and we're involved in distributing money to the other counties. This is kind of the same deal where they're just saying, hey, if we put the time into it, we get the money, it's resources for us. We're really only responsible for our little area, but everybody else has got to come to us to get paid for theirs. And really the only outreach beyond it is just the fiscal aspect of it. We're just going to worry about our little area, but somebody needs to spearhead it a little bit and be in charge of it. So I don't really think we're telling anybody else what to do. We're just simply saying, if you want part of this, you can come to us. We have the cash to pay for it.
This is exactly what I see the 1-1 plan
Right.
being developed to do. And this board has not had that discussion. I don't believe it's come before the Wabasha County Board. Winona County Board has not voted on it. We've only heard it and we haven't got to that. And I feel like we're taking the steps of, this would be exactly what 1-1 would do. This is the exact area that the 1-1 covers.
So so I'm really trying to understand, what would be the downfall of doing it? What's the negative? Why wouldn't we want to do it?
We're interacting with other governments before there's been any votes taken by different boards to do so. We're speaking on behalf of constituencies.
I think we're just accepting a grant, and we're the fiscal agent, and if they want to do it, then they got to come to us. So what are we speaking for? If they don't want to do it,
What you're saying is you think like 1-1 should be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like if 1-1 is going to happen, this
This would be where they should be doing this.
we're not 1-1.
No, we're not.
We're Whitewater Joint Powers Board.
So again, I mean, it's, the concept exists on the table. What's the negative? What's bad out of it? What could bad happen? I mean, what's the negative of doing it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And it's just a genuine question. I don't see any bad out of it, so I'm just trying to understand.
I guess I don't see anything bad out of it either, but it is our job with 1-1 being formed. That's the way I.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm
see it.
looking at. I'm trying to figure out what's the negative.
but the 1-1 still, they're still forming out there. We've done this in the past, to be the fiscal agent, and we look for these grants to cover some of our expenses.
I understand that, but 1-1 wasn't here before, now they're here. So isn't this their job? Isn't this what they were formed for?
It's not formed for the Mississippi Winona in the Crescent.
Okay, it's not,
No, we're not there yet. If that were to happen, if an application were made this year, the earliest we would have a plan would be 2023. And this monitoring needs to be done 2020 and 2021.
I guess I understand that then, if they're not formed yet. Like, you look at some of these areas, I thought, like Red River, I thought they were accepted.
Yeah, they did.
Is it Zumba River one? They're working on that now.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a-
almost done.
That's
yeah.
almost, but it's okay.
Right.
Yeah, well, just from, I guess
So what you're
my
saying is
political
it's
philosophy
too early
is,
for them to take it.
I feel like we're maybe expanding to 1-1 before we've been, really got the support from our community to do so, and I feel like could be damaging for moving that forward. We're going forward with it before the other counties have talked on it, before Waukesha County's talked on it, before our county is, we're using those boundaries and we're moving forward with Mississippi, the Crescent, Mississippi, Winona, the Crescent boundaries, and we're gonna take that authority and we're gonna implement programs beyond the scope of what we've done in a new geographical territory. If this were a few months down the line, my board had discussed it and they had voted for it and authorized it, I'd probably be in a different place.
Okay.
Well, what happens to the money if Winona doesn't want to participate, for example? Does it just go back to the MPCA then, or?
If, the way I look at it, again, we're the fiscal agent, if Winona doesn't want to participate, say, like Winona's, well, they don't get any of the money. No. If they want to participate, fine, we'll just use part of the money to do our Whitewater stuff. That's the way I look at it.
Is the grant subject to everybody
That's
participating?
what I was gonna ask.
And, you know, as far as the work plan, we've already, you know, the staff, I've met with Dave Walter at River SWCD, we met with Terry Peters, and I talked with my supervisor, Kate Qualley, you know, can we work on this monitoring initiative? And so it was input from all of us to put this work plan together.
We're entering into a co-agreement with Winona County and Houston County without having any of those elected officials interact with us. I mean, that's exactly what you do on one watershed, the 1-1 plan. So those officials would interact with each other, agree that this is what they want to do. I mean, I feel like I'm speaking for people that aren't at the table.
And this is for completing actions that are part of the watershed approach, which is not connected with one
See,
watershed.
Matt, I feel like you think this is all in our control. And if it was,
No,
everything's coming to us.
no,
and
I don't know, I didn't say
Okay.
that. I still, it goes back to me, it appears to me we're the fiscal agent and administration of a state grant to participate in projects. If the other groups don't want to
Basically
participate,
just a
that's
pass.
fine. But if they do want to
Then you're assuming that the
participate,
money all comes to us.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I don't think it does. I think that this is an arrangement based on this agreement as a whole. And these parties all collectively saying, we're doing this. And then we become the fiscal agent. But if not everyone's in agreement, we don't necessarily get the rest of the money.
All I know is, we've talked about this at the Soil and Water Board in Waukesha, and we agreed to go forward with it, so, I mean, it is out of the area some, but that wasn't really our concern, because it was somewhat in our area, so that's all I can speak for from Waukesha.
So you have talked about it, I haven't done anything to read on it, so. We
No,
have
but-
talked about it.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We always kind of look forward to grant opportunities just because it helps
Grant.
push forward our goals of
That's kind of,
being good for the environment and saving soil and checking the water and all that. So I mean, we don't like to turn things away, and I think maybe that's what maybe got this a little bit slightly cart before the horse type thing. Because if the one watershed, one plan maybe isn't quite ready to handle it yet, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's.
It seems to me.
not, yeah.
So we're kind of in that spot is, I think, how we got to this point.
well, okay, Sheila, now, we're applying for a grant, 56,000 to.
Right, right.
Okay, that's Steve's question, does that grant totally come to us, or is it divvied up before?
All the money comes to us,
Okay, that's,
and it's all reimbursable, so we incur the expenses from the partners and from us.
that wish to participate,
That wish to participate, I submit the invoice quarterly, and we get paid back. And so the monies from this grant pays for lab expenses, for purchasing some monitoring equipment, for staff time, for mileage. I know I'm missing
Okay,
something.
well, that's
Yeah.
simple. So we are the fiscal agent.
We're just a pass-through.
We're a pass-through
Yeah.
to other agencies. So if the other agencies do not wish to do this,
We,
we
no,
won't
then we
get no we won't
but
get
we don't get the
notice.
remainder of the money. We're the fiscal agent based on a total agreement by all the partners that are in this contract. And if they choose not to implement part of theirs, that doesn't mean that we get the rest of the money.
Probably not.
But
Yeah.
somebody has to complete the tasks, and if they're not completed by local government units, someone else will do it.
Yeah. That makes sense. If we don't spend the money, or they don't do the project, we don't get to keep it. But we are, again, the fiscal agent and administration of this grant. Somebody has to do it. Again, if Houston County doesn't want to do it, fine. Then if it's Houston County takes up $10,000 and we don't do it, then $10,000 isn't taken away from this grant.
We're acting in the authority of the watershed government that has been formed in other areas. We're acting on that behalf before we've really been given that authority, in my view. That's what we're aiming to do, and that's where we're going. We haven't gotten there yet, and I think in my view, it could be damaging to that cause. We're gonna try to move that forward, and we're saying, yeah, we're already doing that. Before Winona County voted on it, before Waukesha County voted on it, we're gonna say, well, we don't really need any of that because we're Whitewater Joint Powers and we're already doing it.
But then the opposite is, do we ask all these entities before we apply for a grant, do we get your permission to apply for a grant to be the fiscal agent? That's kind of ridiculous too.
Well, where did that came from, the MPCA, that they wanted to do it on these watershed bases?
That must be the criteria.
They've been doing this since 2007, doing the assessments of those streams and the lakes in the state, doing them on watershed boundaries.
Houston County's 2 counties away from Waukesha and Olmsted. So, I mean, to me, this is not what we've been doing in the past.
Again, if they don't want to participate in it, fine. I'm not telling them what to do.
So the
I feel like we're
MPCA
expanding
came
our
up
authority.
with this? They come up with that map? MPCA came up with the map? Or
Yeah.
who came up with it?
Well, we came up with the map when we were working on the draft work plan. And we initially had a zoomed-in map on each site, and they said, no, let's keep it simple and combine them all on one map, even though stars are off the county map for Winona.
But they decided for Houston to be on there, or we decided for Houston to be there?
It was mutual. Houston, or Root River SWC said, yeah, we can pick up that site. So that's what, and they are actually doing 2 surface water assessment grants. They're doing this one with us, and they're doing other sites elsewhere as well. So they're participating in 2 different ones.
So they're choosing what they want to do.
If I go to a AMC meeting and I bump into a Houston County Commissioner and we start talking about this, they'll be very surprised. I mean, they won't know that Whitewater Joint Powers joined into some kind of collaborative agreement between Lake Winona, Houston County, and Waukesha County and Olmsted.
It's not a collaborative, it's a,
Sure it is.
no, it's not. We are the fiscal agent to collect PCA money. It still comes down to Houston County or anybody else if they want to participate. We're not overriding anybody else's.
It looks like one material. And we're doing it before we've got there.
Oh, here's a question, just thinking. As long as the Soil and Water District isn't asking for any more money from the county board, I don't think that we have to check everything with the county board before
No.
the Soil and Water District goes ahead with things. That's where I was expected was the way it goes. So, I mean, that's why I don't really have a problem with it. As long as the Soil and Water Districts involved are supportive of it, and it doesn't cost money because it's new money coming in to the various counties. I mean, it's not supposed to cost us money.
I guess I would
that's-
agree with what you're saying, Steve, if 1-1 was totally formed and ready to go, but they're not at this point. So someone's got to pick up this and go with it. So I guess we're going to be the ones doing the pass-through on it.
Well, if they vote for it,
Yeah.
that's good next. So,
This grant's only for 2020 and 21, right?
Correct.
So that if 1-1 gets up and running by 2022, then
Yep.
they can take over with something like that. But, I mean, it seems like these are things that do need to be done, do need to be happening. And if we're the only ones that can make that happen, then it makes sense to me to go ahead with it.
I 100% understand what you're saying too, Steve. Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off? I get exactly what you're saying, but I think I gotta agree with these guys that it's just under the presumption that someday it's going to happen, but it isn't here now. And I guess I see it a little bit different. We're not strong-arming anybody into this. We're just fiscal agents. We're passing money through. I think it's relationships between the other people that are around us. We're really only responsible for our area. We're not physically going out into their counties and doing anything. All we're doing is cutting the checks, just like 1-1 is right now with the SWCD in Winona, but everybody has their own portion of it. It's just a collaborative effort to get more money on a grant application rather than just for us in our little area and the next person and the next person and all the work it takes to do all those grants. So, but I definitely can see the other side. You're right, it is starting to look more like that, but it isn't here yet. So I guess with that, I make a motion to move forward on it.
Okay, well, any other discussion? Okay, a motion by Josh, is there a second?
Second.
Second by James. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
yeah.
Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 1 nay. Okay, now we have the Whitewater Drinking Water Protecting Grant.
Okay. And this was, I think it was in September, this board, or in the fall, this board approved for me to do 2 grant applications. And one was for the North Branch Whitewater to do a sediment reduction project in partnership with Wabasha and Olmsted SWCDs. That one I did not get, but the other one I did get was the drinking water protection grant. A portion, I think it was 20% of the clean water funds that were designated for projects and practices were going to be set aside for initiatives to protect drinking water. The grant application actually had priority areas. If you had townships that had a high number of wells that had high nitrates during the township testing program that NBA did, and also DWSMAs were high priority areas. And then the eligible practices included cover crops and also septic system upgrades for low-income households. So that's what I put into the grant, and I got it. And so I wrote it for the townships within the Whitewater that had those, that had a high number of wells with high nitrates. And there are 9, 2 in Wabasha, 2 in Olmsted, and the rest in Winona County during the initial round that had more than 10% of the wells that were above the 10 parts per million. So that would be the primary focus area. And so what I have in the grant agreement is the is the agreement that I got from Bowser. And so once it's approved, I'm meeting tomorrow with Adam Bielke to do up the work plan. And so once that work plan is approved and I submit it into E-Link, then I can begin working on the grant.
Now, this one, I think you need to go to the townships and say this is what's going on.
Yes, that is one of the things that I think I need to be doing, just to let them know that we've got this program available for farmers and also low-income households to upgrade their systems.
So they know their ask, whatever, maybe they do.
Yep. And in Olmsted County, the townships do the septic systems for the upgrades, not all of them.
Not all of them.
Okay.
There's 14 like on their own.
Farmington, and is Farmington one of those?
No, they belong to the TCPA.
The GQ thing?
Well, no, that's their subcontractor.
Okay,
But their actual administration is the TCPA,
okay,
Township Cooperative Planning Agreement. So I would
okay.
notify them
Mhm.
what area you're looking at. Eota, well, part of it would be the Eota town. What townships we got? I was thinking Quincy, Viola,
Yoda.
Eota is part of it. Now, see, Eota still has the county do their
Oh, okay.
administration.
So then I'll have to go through it.
So I guess I would recommend that you just send a letter to
Mm-hmm.
the townships that, this is Olmsted County, that this is be going on. So, and I couldn't tell you the name of the townships.
Yeah, so Farmington and Dover townships were the ones in Olmsted County in the initial round that were high.
Yeah.
And then the other ones were 5 to 10% of the wells were high.
Yeah. So again, I'd send
Yeah.
a letter to each of the townships, what you're gonna be working on, and to the TCPA, and they can talk
Okay.
about it.
Okay,
But
Yep.
you know, that's Olmsted, you know.
yes.
Okay, anything else on that? We'll approve it then, I guess, right? The grant agreement? So a motion to approve the grant agreement? Motion by James,
Second.
second by Lynn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Okay, next we have H, 2019 Whitewater Joint Powers Accomplishments.
Okay, and I forgot to include this in the December meeting, but basically I just put a couple page summary of some of the projects that we were working on, and we finished up 2 grants. The Ag Certainty contract that we had, and then also the Forest Action Plan grant agreement, which, by the way, too, that also went into the lower Zumbo for outreach, you know, so that was, but it was primarily in the, what they call the areas of biodiversity, high integrity biodiversity areas. And that's what Jen Wells worked on. So anyway, that was just included that in your packet. No discussion necessary. But
Okay,
Do you need each of us, or just the check? Just the check.
yes.
okay, anything else on that one, Sheila? Aye, one watershed, one plan discussion. Okay, I think Steve got something to do. What's this one?
Yes.
Obviously the Mississippi, huh?
Right, and just to inform the board that we're trying to move forward with an application for the Mississippi River Winona La Crescent watershed. I don't know, from what I understand, it looks like it could be very competitive. There would be, I know of 12, I've heard that 12 watersheds they're considering applications for 12 different watersheds. So, and they're gonna pick 6 for this round. So applicants that are selected, well, the application comes out in March and it's due in June. And if selected, the planning process would begin late fall and into 2021 with the plan being completed by June 30th, 2023, with implementation early 2024. So that's the setting. Of course, I'm just bringing it to your attention because the Whitewater is within the boundaries of the Mississippi Winona. And right now, for entities to be involved, counties, SWCDs, and watershed districts. There's no, from what I understand in the language, there's no requirement for a joint powers board to be involved. But, I know in Zumbro, the city of Rochester is involved in their planning process, for an example. So it's been looking different ways and for different watersheds. But I'm just bringing that to your attention. And how and if Whitewater were to be involved, that's up to this board.
Steve,
And I know it's got
something on this? Okay.
Yeah, so you just used the words, it'd be very competitive, right?
yes.
So at Winona County SWC, when I attend those meetings, Daryl was talking about, he was supportive of this because he felt like there would be block grants and they wouldn't have to compete.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ultimately, once all these are up and running, it's going to be more competitive than ever because you're going to have all these new boundaries and intricacies of different pieces fitting together. So this came before, the reason I asked to have it, talk about it at the beginning of the meeting, this came before Winona County to discuss whether we want to pursue another 1-1, we're already in the Root River. And the board tabled it. Wabasha County has not discussed it yet at this point, what I understand, right?
I don't believe so. I've been missing a few meetings lately.
This happened at the last meeting last week.
Yeah.
And we had 3 of us there, right? Because I was going, Bill was going.
No, I'm saying Wabasha County.
Oh, Wabasha.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I know it's.
You approved it, right,
Terry
Matt?
has it on the agenda, but,
I haven't seen nothing about it. About the Mississippi?
Yeah.
yes, it was approved last, and this is something I asked Caitlin about. She said that, and she provided a copy that the Olmsted County Board approved it last year, or 2018, and,
We approved it in 2018.
right. and
Okay, I
approved-
didn't
There were 2
remember it, so good.
resolutions, one for the Zumbro and one for Mississippi.
And, as it's being sold in Winona County, we're kind of being pressured. Olmsted County's already in. It's on the way for Wabasha County. The SWCDs are in. So anyhow, in that discussion, I asked if the acres of the Whitewater, what the Whitewater Joint Powers Board does currently, if that's all contained within this new watershed, and the answer was yes, every acre of the Whitewater, everything that we've been doing would be contained in this larger watershed, correct?
The Whitewater watershed is within the Mississippi Winona watershed.
Yeah, so every acre of it. So then my question was, wouldn't this create a redundancy for us to have a Whitewater Joint Powers Board plus a new 1-1 board doing the same thing on the same acres, competing for the same money? And then I just picked up the paper and I've got with me today one of my fellow commissioners who have been really very, I guess, pro-expansion of government, said, no, we wouldn't have 2 boards. It would be fair to assume that we would pull out, we would probably, or I don't know what her words were, but we wouldn't be in both of those. And they definitely wanted to move forward with 1-1. So that leaves me to, where does this board go if not everyone stays in on it?
So the Mississippi one encompasses what now?
Every acre of this watershed.
Well,
Plus
all the way up to the Lake Itasca? Is that where it starts?
No.
Goes up.
Is that
No,
Lake
those
Itasca?
are basically like from Lake
Well-
Pepin to Houston County, and part of Houston County's in it. It doesn't get in, it doesn't go past, is it just the Indian Creek? So it would be Wabasha County, Olmsted County, Winona County, and Houston County, and all the SWCDs in those areas.
So, okay, back to the Mississippi. So who come to the conclusion, if you just area, because the Mississippi goes way to Lake Itasca, what the one watershed, one plan concept was everything in the watershed since we started. So why is this limited to just southeast Minnesota?
Because these, any place on the perimeter of the state doesn't really fit a watershed design. We're already, anywhere on the perimeter of the state is not using the watershed boundary. So these small areas, we call it Mississippi, we've got all these little tributaries in Winona County that don't flow to the Whitewater, don't flow to any root river, they just flow to the Mississippi. So Winona County is calling that the Winona County, Mississippi, La Crescent, because there's an area down in La Crescent too where it does have a little small watershed, right, that flows together. And so that's the block that they decided would all fit together. So my argument right from the beginning is that we're just screwing up political boundaries that were set years ago, and we're making all new boundaries, and now we're gonna have the same competitive process, and it's gonna be a messy disaster, and it's gonna be hard for the people electing the officials to understand who's interacting with who. But I've reluctantly went along with this, and I had the resolution changed. We're gonna have it come back before us at the next meeting, and we're probably gonna approve it. There it says, Winona County welcomes the opportunity. I said, change that to agrees to participate, because I don't really welcome the opportunity. I feel like if you want 1-1 money, you're gonna have to be part of it. And I'm not a pro expansion of government guy, so I'm probably gonna support this, removing Winona County from this group if we go there. I mean, I'm not gonna have Winona County paying to have staff go out both of these and support my mileage and county time. It's redundant. We're already moving, we just did it with a different, we did it in the new watershed arrangement. And yeah, it's another layer. You all have to decide where things are gonna go, but Rich and I sat on the Southeast Minnesota Water Resource Board, and it made sense to dissolve that board once all these 1-1s came forward. And I don't see the role of this board once 1-1 is made. So
You could be right. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. What we were trying to figure out is what we're gonna do until then, but I
Yeah.
agree with you. Down the road, if everything has upheaval in different groups, certainly some groups will probably have to die
I guess for
out.
the time being, though, and that's good for
Yeah.
down the road, but for the time being, we're still here, we still function, and we still need to make sure we're doing what we need to do until that decides, so we don't just quit today on some assumption
No,
that 2 or 3 years down the road it's gonna dissolve. And that's kind of why I voted the way I did on the other one. We have to focus on today, what's going on today, and then we have what will be tomorrow, whether it's in our control or out of our control. And then actually, by doing what we did before, we actually make a statement that says, we actually don't need 1-1 to decide all this, we can commingle ourselves. We're actually making a statement that says we're capable of doing it ourselves. We can talk to the people around this. We don't need one big entity to come in and tell us what to do. Hey, look at us, see, we just
Yeah,
did
but
it
we
down the road.
won't be eligible for any of those 1-1 grants that she's talking about if we don't opt in.
That's what I'm saying. So down the road, yes, that might be a thing, but today it still is the way it is. So I don't disagree with you, so I
Well,
guess.
it's just for today. I mean, we already had that, we closed it, so I feel like, I don't know whether I should speak to it again, but I feel like this was a cooperative agreement between 3 entities, and you feel like and that's why all the contract was in there, and you feel like we're the pass-through agency. I'm just not on that page. I feel like it's a cooperative agreement between 3 entities, and all these other elected officials and people who've interacted aren't fully understanding what we're doing here. So I'm just not, and I voted against it because I'm not in the same place as you guys are with that. We're just simply a pass-through agency. I didn't read the contract that way, and I don't agree with that. And I don't think the attorney sees it that way.
Yeah. So back to this Mississippi thing. So who's,
I gotta keep going.
all right, well, before you go,
Okay.
one question.
Yeah.
On April 16th, I can't make that date.
Yep.
Do you just want to have it, allow me, it's fine, or we will move the date? That's the question.
The day before is tax day, so.
Well, but whatever. So whatever the board wishes to do. If they, I don't have to.
anything work, I think.
Yeah, I can, for the most part. I would just say maybe leave the tax in case somebody has something come open on the 15th, but
The following day on Friday? April 17th? My schedule's open.
yeah, that would work for me, I guess, as it written up.
Whoever wishes to do that.
That's fine.
I'm okay with
We'll do it
Friday.
Friday.
Open.
Okay,
Friday, April 17th.
okay, see ya.
Thank you.
You're permitted to leave.
Thanks.
All right, so back to this Mississippi thing. So
Okay.
who's really spearheading all this? And, well, obviously Bowser, I imagine.
Right, Bowser.
So
and-
they're,
And part of the state transition to watershed-based planning. And I think I included this in the package, showing these are the watersheds that are currently involved. And I guess one of the things that Daryl mentioned was that, you know, if we don't do this now, you know, if we do this now and get it, we'll have 10 to 11 years of one watershed, one plan funding before, you know, the 2034. So that's kind of where, and what's I think SWCs are finding attractive is that it's a stable funding source for a period of time.
well,
And-
everybody's promising money. So
Right.
is there a Mississippi River watershed plan coming? I don't know. Is there
Yeah.
a Red River Valley?
So that's what the HUC stands for. HUC is how big, I mean, like there's the Mississippi Basin, it's huge, there's smaller watersheds. And for this is what we're entering into here is a conglomeration of really,
Superpowers.
no, I'm just saying, this is like, I don't know, maybe 7 micro watersheds. This is
Yeah.
not, I mean, Whitewater, the Whitewater River is a watershed, but we're adding a bunch of little tributaries that run from the middle of Winona County down to the Mississippi River. That's why they call it Mississippi. Those are so those are small watersheds. So we've got, but they decided that they wanted to come up with 63 watersheds in the end. It was originally proposed for like almost 90 watersheds, and then they said, well, this is gonna streamline things, and the counties all said, well, there's 87 counties, and now we're gonna have 97 watersheds, that's not streamlining. So then they condensed it, I think, down to 63 to say, see, there's less watersheds than counties. But the interaction between the different entities that are involved and the elected officials that are involved is just, it's gonna get really complex, and you start looking at a small piece of Houston County with large parts of Wabasha and Olmsted County and Winona County. How do you decide how much power each one of those? Because at first we're all working together, but it ain't gonna be long and they're gonna be saying, we should be the fiscal agent. No, we should be the fiscal agent. Well, who controls the money? Where does it go? And the approach was, we're gonna use this to target where the best areas are to spend money. And that's why it makes sense to do it. And so for me, I didn't ever follow that train of thought, because right now we use willing participants. And my property might not be in the targeted area, so now I used to could get money because I'm a willing participant, but now I'm not in the targeted area, so it made it harder for me to get money. I didn't follow the approach.
Well, this is informational right now. Monday, I got the river one watershed. 10 counties get there.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna bring this up, you know, and Daryl will be there. Bowser will be there.
But you're already in, you've already approved going into this.
I forget, I didn't remember. But the question is, to me, like I say, you can draw the whole Mississippi, you can draw the whole Minnesota River, you can do the whole Red River. How
Ways
big
to
of,
look at it.
how big of watersheds we're thinking around here?
If it gets that big, then you almost go federal and forget about
Yeah,
it.
you forget about it. What the heck we're creating here? I don't know. So,
Well, I can say that when they were trying to decide on what scale or what size hucks to do in the state for this watershed-based planning, Bowser settled on the HUC 8, which is a HUC identifier with 8 digits. So that's what they decided across the state to do. And we are in a unique situation, like Steve said, we're at the boundary of a state boundary, so watersheds kind of get goofy
It's
on a
really not
shoreline.
unique because
Yeah.
literally half the counties are on the perimeter. If you go around it, half of the counties are, and they're not using watershed boundaries, they're using the old county boundaries on one side and they're using the watershed on the other side. Just like us, we're using Mississippi on one side and we're using the watershed boundary on the other side.
But we're using the Mississippi River as a boundary. And because you're having a coastline, they call that a remnant watershed, where you have a true watershed, which is the Zumbro. Everything flows to one point, the root, everything flows to one point, and we're kind of stuck in the
It
middle.
does, conveniently, it
Yeah.
does work in some areas, but
Right. I agree.
I could, but, well.
in a
we-
perfect world, and it probably doesn't work half the time.
But we deal in water here, but you, me, and you, we got a mess with DHS, which turned into Department, Human Services,
Yeah.
which has turned into a humongous agency of, you can't find nothing out anymore. So, is this turning into, I'm just paralleling what the state does to us. You make these humongous watersheds, and you're right, Steve. But how big is this? Who's doing what? So, the state's famous for coming with these great ideas, and they turn into a disaster. So, again, I agree. There's more we need to know what, instead of the promise, oh, we're gonna get these grants. They never come true. I've seen that too much we've seen that too much in other agencies. So, I'll be looking at this, so, even though I guess we voted for it.
One of the biggest frustrations to my constituency is, right now, we've got very specific soil and water conservation district elected officials for specific areas. And this really adds a fair amount of irrelevance to that whole philosophy, because this is new boundaries, and it really pits one against the other to compete against each other, rather than collectively working together for the boundaries within your county that you've been elected to represent. If you're living somewhere where a few watersheds come together, you don't know which elected official to go to deal with the water situation that's in your area. And these are coming together at all kinds of different boundaries, and it circumvents a process that's worked very well for a long time. The SWCDs have been the single most feet on the ground, putting programs on the ground of anything we have, and it's worked fine for 75 years. And this doesn't enhance that, and doesn't streamline it. It only makes it messy. It diminishes power, and in some cases, I think in your case, Matt, you entered into, I wouldn't let my county do it, entered into a joint powers board. I said, we're not gonna have a board. In the canon, you're part of the canon, aren't you?
No, there's one thing, no.
Or no, Zumbro, that's the one.
I don't think they did, but the Root River.
Yes, there
I
was.
would not do a joint, we did a joint powers agreement.
Yes, yeah.
Agreement, and last I knew,
But
the
there's
Zumbro was gonna
It's
do
either
the same
Zumbro or
thing.
Canon. I'm pretty sure it's Zumbro. It's got a board. It's a joint powers board, which is
Did
yet
they-
another.
is that what they
Canon,
did?
canon.
Okay.
All right, so.
So anyhow, that becomes another level of government.
Yes,
But so
right.
anyhow, MCIT said, Jen Wolf, when I was at a meeting, said, we don't care whether you are an entity or you have an agreement. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, we ain't insuring you. That's what she said.
We had that Root River, but I was one of the ones, we're doing a joint powers agreement,
Mhm.
and I parallel it to like our rural fire department, mutual aid. That was the concept. We stayed away, and we had and Marcia was there, she did something. So, again,
Yeah, Marcia's not real excited about any of this.
no, I know. So the Root River, and as far as I know, the Zumbro will be a joint powers agreement. Not, so that
Yeah.
gave each
But
elected
anyhow.
body their still authority. So, and I don't know what they did a joint powers.
At our mom meeting yesterday, we had actually a panel of people who were involved with Watershed One plans. And there are some that actually are not even using a joint powers agreement, they're using just a memorandum of agreement for
Same principle.
administrative, yeah.
Same principle on it. So, well, again, I got Monday, I'll have the Root River. Well, I'll talk about this Mississippi, because we usually have a pretty good turnout of some state. But that one there, where is Daryl is our Winona County is our fiscal agent. So, you know, so that, you know, Daryl dishes the money out to the different counties. So, and we pay, Winona
So
County.
at the
how it
last
works.
SWCD meeting,
Yeah.
Fillmore County is asking to be the fiscal agent because it makes sense. Because they're they've got the most
Yeah,
land here.
100%, yeah.
And then the discussion at the SWCD board was, yeah, well, it makes more sense for someone not in the large area to control the money. So I mean, there's already tensions between who's gonna control that money. And
Well, that's
Winona County said, weren't you at the meeting, Sheila?
Yes, I was, but I don't recognize that as tension. There was just a discussion
Okay.
of who has the capacity to
Do
be
it.
the fiscal.
So currently it's Winona County. And then, so then it was discussion about this new one that we're setting up. So should Winona County be the fiscal agent since we're the largest landmass? And the kind of consensus was, yeah, well, then you're the fiscal agent for both the Root River and the Winona. Isn't that putting a lot of power? And yeah, maybe it should be Wabasha County. And then they said, well, why should Wabasha County be the fiscal agent for a landmass that's largely in Winona County? Well, maybe it should be Olmsted County. Well, yeah, so I'm just saying, it's gonna get more and more complex. It's not gonna get simpler.
Anytime you start looking at large sums of money like that, and if it comes true, it will be a large sum of money, you're gonna have an argument over who's gonna control it.
And eventually, there's gonna be a court case and someone's gonna be sued because you put this here and that dam
Like
broke
that,
and
too.
these people were damaged and that's where saying that it's just an agreement, that don't fly then, because you were managing it and the insurance company is gonna say, we didn't insure you, we didn't agree to take you on. Somebody's gonna get sued, and the county's gonna say, well, it ain't us, because this is they're their own entity.
Theoretically,
Obviously, we got a lot of information coming in this one.
theoretically, you can't keep any grant money that you don't use, so if someone's gotta submit their bills for services and whatever, it's all gotta be paid out, and if it's not, it goes back, so I mean, I know people get crazy ideas, but I can't even really see why, if you're the fiscal agent or not, it really matters, as far as, you know, it's really no power, you're just doing the bookkeeping, you get a bit of a fund for that.
It ends
so.
up to be more work than it's worth, huh?
Yeah. Okay, we gotta keep going here. Next, we have the J Focused Water. Sheila, what do we have that?
Yes, yesterday at the law meeting, Greg Johnson from the MPCA and Cindy Penny gave a presentation on the 319 Focused Watershed Program. And that's the one that last year in April we resubmitted our letter of interest. And I would like to ask that we resubmit that letter again. Because based on their presentation yesterday, looks like they're settling on Huck 12 watershed, which is smaller. You know, the south branch of the Whitewater has 2 Huck 12s. And just to identify in a letter one of those, you know, whether it's in the north branch or the middle or the south. And so I would propose that for the next meeting, I would kind of do an assessment of those scale watersheds within the Whitewater and have this board provide input on which one this board thinks we should resubmit an interest letter for.
Yeah. Do that. Okay, anything else? If not, if that works, we'll move April's meeting till Friday.
Okay,
I
and I will
guess-
check to see if this place is open, otherwise
open
I'll
up.
send Charles.
And go from there.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Steve, second by Rich, adjourn, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Okay. Okay, so I have 2 agreements.
Wait, anything here? Is this all Josh's or me too?
He should sign this, and let's see see if he signed this. Yep, he did that one. Yeah, he signs those. He did
Okay.
good. He did good on that.
Checks, any checks in here? Got something? Down there, down there.
Okay. So this,
And that right there is Steve's plan,
It's gonna get messier.
and this one has 2.
I'm too old for this.
I think you're just right for it. See, Rich?
I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, Rich, good.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
It's good to have.
All right,
With that kind of stuff, you always kind of wonder what the outcome is going to be, you know, but you don't have much choice, and you kind of got to do it.
yeah. And this guy had surgery too.
It's not nearly that serious, I don't think.
Oh, then you get in the hospital too.
Yeah.
We're all falling apart. That's why I can't come to 16.
That's the bummer about getting older.
I gotta be in some
Your golden years, huh?
I gotta, some stuff I gotta get done.
Yeah. Wait till this- I'm hoping 2020 is better than 2019 was, because I got
Yeah, you
way
don't
too
wanna have
much
another
time in St.
2019.
Mary's last
No.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one watershed one plan, thing, it just makes me wonder.
I think there are better ways to set it up. And,
For the watershed?
well, no, just the whole structure.
Well, the concept, again, how big do you wanna get in
Right,
watersheds?
I don't think anything ever really saves money. I mean, you think,
If,
oh, yeah.
if you wanna get
They
another
just keep changing
humongous
things and saying
level
it's going
of
to.
government,
I
well,
think
there's a
you
good
gotta
way to do
lose
it.
that personal touch, and lose all of
I
these
think you
little
got them all.
things like this.
Yeah.
Put these in here.
And it just makes me wonder how that's gonna come out. We will see if people,
See you, Rich. Take care.
and you guys too.
Yep, me too.